welcome to the 2023 inaugural edition of the Growth Clinic. So for those of you that are new here, welcome. This is a now monthly community event where we share knowledge and techniques designed to help you guys grow. First off, we want to thank you guys for joining us here today, being a part of our community. We hope you find this session useful. If you do, please share it with your friends. We'd love to have them join as well. Get a big group of smart, savvy marketers here helping each other out. And as always, we want this to be the most valuable hour of your week, if not month. So please, we've got the chat section here. We're going to be talking about a lot of topics here. We want to hear your input and your feedback and your questions as we talk through the topic we're going to cover today. So please thread up in that chat thread. Hopefully we'll be able to answer every single one of your questions before we hop off here today. Without further ado, let's get into it. So the topic for today is setting the stage for 2023. So a lot of changes are coming to marketing, and from everything from the rise of AI, Chat GPT, I'm sure you guys have been bombarded with YouTube videos and LinkedIn posts on that, all the way to how the role of marketing is changing, especially in the recessionary environment we seem to be continually headed into. So the question becomes, how can we as marketers adapt to this new climate, this new ecosystem, this ever-evolving world where we're constantly seeing change? It seems becoming faster and faster and faster. So how can we stay on top of these trends in 2023? And how can we, as marketers, set ourselves up to be successful? And I feel very lucky today. We have the perfect guest to talk us through this. He is, like me, something of a lifer here at WebMechanix. He is a brilliant marketer. He's worked with hundreds of companies at this point, helping them solve their digital and growth marketing challenges. He is an avid runner. He's I believe, multi-time Ironman now, if I'm correct. And just an impressive individual all around. And I'm pleased and thrilled to call him my friend, Josh Muskin. Thank you for hosting the Growth Hunt today.
Yeah, happy to be here. Really excited to kick off the new year with a little chat here, and then 12 or 11 more months of awesomeness coming everyone's way.
Yep, love it. So let's dive in. I guess to start, Josh, I was curious. I read in your recent Media Muse article, you talked about how the role of the marketer is changing, particularly this year. So could you talk us through some of those changes, and what should we as marketers be aware of this coming down the pike?
There's been a lot of noise recently. I mean, there are more channels than ever before. This time last year, everyone was talking about TikTok, and we've since moved way past that into Chat GPT now being integrated with Bing search and everything in between. There are, a couple changes over the last 12 months that are at least noteworthy enough to spend some time with. And one of those is going to be the type of content you put out, getting user-generated content similar to what you see from influencers on Reels and TikTok, but from the B2B perspective and other content mediums that are coming, how that all interacts with the latest buzzword of dark social and all of this other stuff that is really just unattributable. And particularly as we head into some economic uncertainty and maybe a little less eagerness to buy from prospects, there's a shift in what some of the most valuable things out there are given away for free. So what are you giving away? What kind of value are you providing to your community and to your potential prospects? And at what volume to actually make them interested in coming back to you? So it's a little bit different than the put the ebook out, get the leads, send the lead to sales, and make the money machine go. So we have to kind of look at it a little bit differently. It's a little bit less of a pressure sale. We've got more mediums than ever to do that.
Yeah, that makes total sense. And yeah, I mean, it sounds like really leading with value is key, right? Like, instead of thinking about like, what can I get from my prospect in order to make my process work, reversing that, instead of thinking about how can I create a valuable experience for my prospects in such a way that they're attracted and they want to do business with me, right? Versus forcing them through some kind of marketing process that doesn't align to their needs and goals.
Yeah, you got it.
Yep. So turning our attention to the game of marketing itself, how do you think our approach to marketing itself will change in this coming year?
There are, like any year, there are things that will change and things that stay the same. The stuff that stays the same, you're going to want to continue to improve your prowess and all of those tactical things, your media buying, your budgeting, the information that you put onto the website and how it aligns to your company's messaging. Like, all that's just going to keep happening, and it should, and you should continue to improve in it. But this year is really going to be about what you do with those subjective things that aren't as binary, aren't as metrics based, things like the type of content you put out and how it's consumed, if you are interacting with or building or providing value to a community, what kind of impact you're giving away. We find that most people we work with, the minority are still the ones generating and creating demand. Everyone's ready to capture it. They got wide open arms. Hey, if you want to give me money, come on here. I got 19 funnels for you to do that through. But fewer people are thinking about how do they put something out there and get something back. And we'll talk about this a little later, I think, but when we couple all of this happening with the eventual deprecation of the cookie, there really has to be a focus on that first party data and collecting more and creating places that you really own, your email lists, your communities, something that you can spend this year really building so that when there is limited targeting and there are no cookies in the future, you still have something to fall back on that you can use as a marketing engine.
Yep. And for those listening, we did a session of the Growth Clinic back in 2023 on the eventual death of third-party cookies and what you guys can do to adapt. So I'll dig that up and throw that in the chat here. But yeah, guys, it's coming. It's time to build your first-party data sets and really own the relationship with the customer, right? Because if you're relying on these third-party data sets, there's no guarantee they're going to be there tomorrow. So to Josh's point, this is a huge opportunity in 2023 to think about how can we start to, build our data sets, own the relationship with the customer, and really take control. Josh, turning our attention to sort of your last decade of marketing. So you've worked in B2C, you've worked in B2B, and one of the things I know, you and I both noticed over the years is this shift of several B2C practices that were historically kind of, direct to consumer, moving over to the B2B crowd. I'm curious for 2023, what B2C ideas do you see arriving or coming to the B2B arena?
Yeah, I think there's really two. I mean, we have to thank all the B2C folks for going out there and pioneering it all. And then when we get our heads around it from the business perspective, it's some of the research is done for us. But one I've mentioned quite a bit already, it's that style of content they use. We call it UGC or user generated content. It really is synonymous with that short format vertical video that is native to things like Facebook, TikTok, Instagram. But even if you could consider it for LinkedIn, the idea is less about the format itself and more about what it forces you to do with what you're trying to say. You get 60 seconds to make a really clear point, and it has to be disruptive enough to stop people from scrolling. And in B2B, where sometimes overwhelmed with landing pages with big technical paragraphs and lots of buzzwords, and you can't really do any of that when you only have 60 seconds to make your point. So you can give short demos and quick value explanations and really take your key features of your product service and distill it down into something really bite-sized and distribute it in that way. But it's a new form of content being consumed at a super high rate. It's now very, very common, and it does kind of put your lens on differently for how it is that you need to present your content, because you can't get too into the weeds with it. That's a big one, both from how you create the content and how it is that you present it, as well as platforms like Facebook and Instagram are actually giving some sort of inexpensive CPM priority to that format, because it's such a big activity driver with the users that they have, that it actually is a little bit cheaper to advertise with those formats than it is on things like static and carousels and everything else that you're used to. So you really kind of get two benefits of tackling that. And the second big one from B2C is, it's been around for a little while, but it's really the idea of optimizing to a funnel and not to a number of leads. So something we talk about quite a bit is many leads in the B2B world are a form fill. And in most cases, when you're running ads, you're saying, hey, go get me as many people that are willing to fill out this form as possible. I know that they're not all going to be quality. Maybe 60% of them are. And sales then calls those MQLs and it moves down and goes from there. But with more ad platforms adding APIs, so Google, Facebook, LinkedIn is recently launching one as well, where you can actually hook into CRM level data or pre-filter lead quality, like with Facebook's new lead form. You can start to tell these platforms, hey, I don't care about the people that fill out the form. I care about the people that fill out the form when they selected these three criteria and when sales marks them as an MQL. And if you have the volume for it, and you start to tell the platforms, hey, go after the people who turn into revenue and turn into deals, you are going to see more deals than you are just massive form fills. And B2C has been doing this forever in e-commerce, bidding to things like add to cart or cart abandoned, people who are like almost there, and they know that's a little bit better quality than people shopping around. The CRM version of that is our opportunity to do that with B2B.
Yep, that makes total sense. And yeah, it's such a huge opportunity for B2B marketers because, it's especially when you have to do more with less. You have to you can't have these big sales teams that cost a lot of money following up with all these leads and hoping that a few of them whittle down to opportunities. Now with AI, you can essentially train Google and train Facebook and train these platforms. Hey, this is the type of company that we work with that makes sense for our business, right? And optimize towards that versus having to rely on a big pool of leads that have to get manually worked and may not shake out to anything in the long term. Josh, I'll add one thing to your sort of B2C coming over to B2B list. So in B2C, like the concept of try before you buy has been pretty big in the last 10 years, right? I think of like Warby Parker, where they send you the lenses and you can try them on before you actually buy the pair you want. In this recessionary environment, B2Bs are going to start acting the same way, right? They're going to want to know, hey, can I see the product before I actually use it, right? So free trials have been around for a while, but I think one thing we'll see a lot more of is sort of on-site, sort of live interactive demos, right? So removing that barrier to having to get on a phone call with a qualifying SDR who then gets you on another phone call with an account executive. I think we're going to see that go away more and more in place of these on-site sort of interactive demos. And there are tools you can do this as a marketer now actually use to set up these sorts of experiences on your website. Nevadic is one of them, and there's certainly others. But buyers are going to want this. They're going to want to see, ask, hey, show me the product. Show me how your technology works. Take me through it. And then once I understand the product, then and only then do I want to have a conversation about how this aligns with my needs and if it can fit into my ever shrinking budget. So as you're looking into 2023, I would think about how can you basically give as much of the product away and the experience away for the customer as possible, so that you're then able to get down to the meat of okay, how can we solve this? Use this as a solution for your unique situation and needs.
Yeah, speed to value.
Yep, 100%. So Josh, you've spoken in the past in your Medium News articles about some critical laws for building your marketing plan. So January, we're in planning season. How can we as marketers get ahead of our planning in 2023, especially with the growing chaos and uncertainty we're seeing around us?
Yeah, I mean, the chaos and uncertainty, really, they lend themselves to a forced discipline for the year. There's tons of shiny things that we can do. And in years where it's not been as uncertain and everyone's flush with cash, there's a lot more testing and a lot more, hey, let's try this, let's try that. But if you're in a position where your goals are the same and your budget is not, then you really have to kind of buckle down and say, what is it that I'm going to do and how am I going to stick with it? And I found the best way to do that is really to consider everything you're doing in marketing like a folder structure. If you've ever seen someone's Mac Finder or My Computer folders, like very organized, you're thinking about the same thing. You want to pick what are the 2 to 4 really big ideas that are critical that we have to make movement on this year. So you call those your pillars. It might be 2, 3, or 4 of them. And inside of each pillar, you're going to have initiatives. Like in order to move this pillar forward, we should try a couple things and they'll fit into these initiative categories. Each initiative then has your campaigns. They might be multiple ad platforms. They might include email, might be a amalgamation of things put together. And then each of those in and of itself is a tactic. And what you're doing when you break things down like that, pillar, initiative, campaign, tactic, is you're keeping yourself organized, and you're able to say, hey, this activity that I'm now thinking about doing today, does it fit into one of these categories? If it does, great, then it has a place. If it doesn't, let me put it off to the side because it maybe isn't as important as I thought it was. It also makes it removes some decision-making for how you're going to report to your superiors, how you're going to communicate to the company what you're doing, because you can tie everything back to, everyone can remember 4 things. You can tie everything back to one of the 2 to 4 things that you've decided as a pillar. And then as they ask for more details, it's easy to drill down into what do the campaigns look like? What's the messaging? What platforms are we on? And you can go down that rabbit hole versus, hey, what's marketing doing? And you're like, we're running some ads to some people. It adds a little bit of organization, and it helps you with the talk track for that internal and external communication. And my personal favorite, it makes it easy to say no to things that don't fit in.
Yep, that makes total sense. And yeah, I think that Josh, you've also mentioned sort of following that structure is going to require some discipline, right? So how do we think about, like, how do we not just create this structure and ensure we have sort of a heuristic for how we can explain what we're doing to our executives, but how do we make sure that we stick to it throughout the year, especially as things change and things we start to see other opportunities on the horizon?
Yeah, there are two real ways that they can be handled. One is simply everyone agrees that it's a good idea, but it's not the right time. And that thing can sit in a parking lot or a to-do list for next year, or we should consider this when we have the resources. That's the easiest one because everyone's on the same page. If you find yourself with some conflict's a big word, but some conflict, like your superior really wants to try this thing they heard about, and you really don't think it fits into one of those pillars, that's where you get to have a very candid prioritization conversation. You get to say, okay, we can try that, but it's going to come at the cost of one of these things. One of these things we have research on, we put resources behind, there's movement. If you think one of these should stop and replace it, cool, but we're now setting an expectation for what's going to go missing. And in some cases, again, you agree that, hey, this is actually a really great idea and it should replace this thing, and that thing goes into the parking lot. But it at least is a device by which to have candid conversations around what you would then be missing out on. Or, hey, we can do this as a fifth thing, but like, I need to hire 2 people. It can lend itself to that conversation too. So it's either agreeing that it's a good idea, but it should be done later, or it's having a conversation around either what it's going to replace or what new resources need to be input to the situation to actually handle it as an additive.
Yep. And to your point, having that structure of kind of the pillar on down is what allows you to then justify all those changes or modifications as they come up.
Yep.
Makes sense. So speaking of shiny objects, let's talk marketing tech. So obviously the big thing that we're all being bombarded with is the rise of AI, Chat GPT. Well, let's talk about it. What opportunities do you see that exist for marketers to leverage this tech and other AI solutions, and how should we be thinking about these as we head into the new year?
Yeah, I can't attribute it because I don't remember who said it, but I saw a quote on LinkedIn that was something to the effect of, the new AI, Chat GPT, Midjourney, whatever, AI is not going to take your job from you, but a human correctly using it might. And us being the humans in that scenario, it's our job to figure out what these platforms can do in their current state and then how we can use them. So for anyone who's played around with Chat GPT, for example, it can give you some really cool stuff for things that are binary, like what's the HTML code for inserting an image into a page. Like, it'll give you a really clear and concise answer. But the more abstract the question, the more, in some cases, ridiculous the answer is. So you have to understand what its limitations are. And there are a few things it's really good for, and a lot of it falls into things like ideation. So if you're sending out an email and you need 15 subject lines just to kind of get your brain moving into what your test might be, it's really, really good for that. It'll spit some stuff out, and you're probably not going to copy paste them, but you might get some ideas that you didn't otherwise have. Article headlines, etc. But you're probably not going to say, hey, ChatGPT, write me a marketing plan for 2023, and then just like use what it gives you.
Yep.
So play around with it, understand where you get ideas and inspiration, but it's not, at least yet, depending on who you ask about it, to a point where you can just take exactly what it is, copy it, move on. The potential exception to that is when you start talking about the creative AI that's been around. So Midjourney, DALL-E 2, there's some other names that I can't remember. If you have someone who's really skilled at prompting those, you can get some really awesome artwork back. And in some cases, it might be exactly what you want. But again, it probably isn't going to be perfect to what you want it to be. So it's really, really good for things like concepting or storyboarding, or otherwise just something to get a conversation moving. And hey, maybe next year I'm like, hey guys, whatever ChatGPT says, like, just do it. It's perfect. But we're not there yet. So you just have to understand what its limitations are, figure out how you can use it, and then take that and apply it to really the human half of the equation.
Yeah, for sure. And one thing I'll add that I found has worked for me, particularly with ChatGPT, but I think this could apply to Midjourney and others as well, is not going off of the first thing that it gives you, right? But using that as a starting point and building off of it. So to give you an example, say I want to write copy that I'm trying to write for IT directors, right? So the first thing I might ask ChatGPT is, hey, ChatGPT, give me 10 problems that marketing IT directors are facing right now, right? And it'll spit out whatever it spits out, and they'll be pretty standard, the same thing it'll tell everybody. Then you say, okay, great. So take those 10 items, ChatGPT, and create an emotional story around each of those, right? So then you're taking those problems and you're getting ideas for how you can craft an emotional narrative that'll resonate with your audience, right? So it's not just like, hey, give me this information. You're using ChatGPT to start getting some of that language that then you can use and iterate off of, which goes a little bit deeper than just what it'll give everyone on the surface level.
Yeah, I mean, what you just said, Jared, it's reminding yourself to use these things as a tool and not as an answer.
Right. Exactly. So on the channel side of things, thinking about marketing channels, what new platforms, whether it be for ads or social media, should we be thinking about?
Yeah, the audible laughter that will come out of this is like the new platform for B2B everyone should look at now is LinkedIn. And that's not totally a joke, but over the last year, LinkedIn has put a lot of effort into really modernize the ad platforms. We've come used to them on things like Facebook and Google Ads. The biggest change and investment they've done recently is a conversions API so that you can do a little bit of what we talked about earlier. You can start to say, hey, LinkedIn, don't just get me form fills. Go ahead and get me this stuff that's ending up in my CRM instead. And that's either just launched or launching very soon. So a little bit of technical implementation required, but it'll help where probably B2B's best targeting is for things like title and company and role and all that, move itself a bit closer to the machine learning capabilities that you would get from Facebook and otherwise. And so that has been, at least for us, kind of a really big focus. LinkedIn's always been there, but it's always been expensive and obscure and kind of hard to optimize towards. But as they really start to put some effort into that backend API portion, we'll start to see, and we have started to see really a lot better results from the quality perspective. CPMs are still going to be expensive, whatever, it's what it is with that platform, but it'll start to make more sense to put some dollars there because you'll be able to better guarantee that what you're going to get out of it will be closer to the quality half of the spectrum versus just the form filler half. And, really any platform now, regardless of what its name is, that starts to offer ways to integrate with Salesforce and HubSpot, whatever CRM you're using, really start to pay attention to that because it really has been a shift, in some cases dramatically over the last 12 months, of leads are not what anyone cares about anymore. And everyone's always cared about opportunities and deals and all of that. They've never had a way to just skip the lead and optimize towards that thing. But with these platforms getting smarter, that is becoming more and more available. So as you start to see, hey, such and such platform releasing an API to get into Salesforce, to get into HubSpot deal records, really kind of pay attention to that because it'll open up an entire new area or set of platforms that you might previously not have considered because that wasn't available to you.
Yep. And I'll throw on, this is kind of micro, but one sort of ninja trick for, because one of the challenges you can run into with LinkedIn is if your audience is really specific, it might be hard to reach them just with a native targeting within LinkedIn, right? So if they have a specific job title that LinkedIn doesn't have, for example, what you can do is so LinkedIn has a tool called Sales Navigator, which allows you to build lists of prospects based on very specific keywords and criteria. It allows you to get a lot more granular in terms of the who. What you can then do is use a tool called Phantom Buster, which I'll put in the chat here. And you can use that tool to actually scrape a list of those contacts, right? And then you can enrich that with a tool like Zoom Info or Sales Intel to build a list of LinkedIn URLs, which you can, with emails, which you could then feed back into LinkedIn, right? So you're basically taking those LinkedIn contacts and feeding them back in, and boom, right? So say you want to very specifically target like outsourced, like fractional CFOs or something like that. Say that's your target, right? Probably not a job title LinkedIn, but you could build a list of those in Sales Navigator, scrape them with a tool like Phantom Buster, feed them back in as a matched audience, and then boom, you have a very targeted list. We're just testing this with an audience now, and we're seeing crazy click-through rates. And if you're familiar with LinkedIn, the CPCs can be 10, 20, 30 plus bucks. We're seeing less than $1 to $1 to $2 CPCs. So little tactic for you. I'll drop the link to that tool in the chat there, but good workaround if you're looking to get to a niche audience on LinkedIn. So one of the things that I think most marketers are thinking about right now, and we touched on this earlier, is this eventual death of third-party cookies, right? At some point, theoretically, Google Chrome is going to take away third-party cookies, and it's happening across other platforms as well. So what are some things we as marketers can do to start preparing for this transition?
Yeah, and there's really only one answer, and you have to create your own database of first-party data. And there are dozens of ways to do it, but you have to think of things like creating communities and email lists as an immediate step to start thinking about how you're going to do that. Because at some point, when you can't retarget the people who are just coming to the site, they have to come and find you and engage with you in some other way. And you need to create the way for them to do that. And so that goes back to one of the very first things we talked about, just giving away value. If you're just giving away value, you can build a pretty big newsletter list. You can get people just subscribing because they start to believe they're not going to get sold to. And then a year down the road, when you can't otherwise target them, promotional email, you built a lot of trust, you can get something back for it. But if you don't start that now, you're going to have the same 100 people on your email list next January as you do now, but you won't have any ability to target anyone outside of that. So really, it's just creating a fan base for your company in whatever way you can put out the most content and give the most value. Just collect something, name, email, doesn't even have to be phone. Work on your social followings from an organic perspective, but it's got to be genuine, and it's got to actually provide some value to these folks. You can't just go buy a list that won't do quite the same thing, especially like who were we talking about the other day? Zoom Info knows if you buy a list but you don't pay them anymore, and then you go and target it. Like they're getting a little bit smarter about just people stockpiling their information.
Right.
So building your own is really the only way to get around the third-party cooking going away. And like, look, ad platforms will exist. There will be ways to target people, but it's not going to be quite as good. It's going to be more akin to like what we've seen Facebook do with housing, employment, and credit. It's like you can target them, but you can't target age and household income and all these other wonderful demographics that you otherwise could. It would just be more vague and open source. So first party data, and then if you're doing the advertising, getting all of your tech work done so that you can start to optimize towards first party data that you have. So it's that CRM discussion again, just makes you less and less reliant on what will continue to become vaguer and vaguer targeting from an ad perspective.
Yeah, and I think part of the key, which we were talking about earlier, is not treating your prospects like, inputs into a machine necessarily. Though in a way they are, right? They're into our marketing machine, but really thinking about them as like humans, like, and how can we build a relationship with and relate to these humans? Like if you approach your, your first party data set, if you will, with that perspective in mind, I think you're going to see a lower opt-out rates. You're going to see higher engagement. You're going to see more people willing to stay on your list. And you're going to have better long-term outcomes in terms of, people actually saying, hey, maybe I should actually hire this product or service, right? Because they actually provide genuine value to me. So yeah, Josh, I think that makes total sense. I'm curious from your perspective, we're talking about a lot of changes and a lot of things that will be shifting. What do you think is not going to change in 2023? What should we continue to focus on as marketers?
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately for most of the people here and not on this calls, your goals probably aren't changing. They're probably set 2 years ago. They don't care about the fact that you have half the budget that you had before, but you still have to drive 30% more MQLs and revenue and whatever else. And a lot of the conversation we've had today really has been around where can you do more with less? And whether that's people or ad spend or tools or what have you, there's a big activity worth being done this month and next month to set up for the rest of the year of building out your entire funnel and visualizing it and really trying to figure out what's off. Where's the leverage point to put a lot of your focus? Make that one of those pillars we talked about earlier. In some cases, it's close rate. There's just all the leads are great. The salespeople are brand new though. And if we can just increase close rates, then business is fine. We don't have to spend any more or hire anyone else. Sometimes it's conversion rate on the website. Sometimes you're running 5 ad platforms because last year they had the luxury to do so, but only 2 of them are profitable. And really starting to honestly have a conversation with yourself of, if I'm going to move one metric over the next 10 months, which one's going to get me the most impact? And you'll find that there's a lot happening that either can be turned off or pulled back or is not totally necessary, because if you make even small tweaks to that one metric and that one leverage point, any optimization you would have made to several others is sort of obsolete. And that's kind of the real the real big one. So in addition to all the other things we've discussed, like starting to build first party data and making sure your data is nice and clean, really that honest conversation of what's that one data point that you could move that would make the biggest impact to your funnel, and making sure that that is a key cog in your plan for the year. That's one of the best ways to do more with less. It's just focus.
Yep. Follow on course until success. So on that note, I think that ties nicely into my next question. So obviously there's a lot of noise. There's a lot of shiny objects, which we covered, and kind of how to handle that. And there's a lot of scary stuff going on. I guess all that being the case, and with all the changes, what mindset should we have headed into 2023?
I don't want to over-index on the word discipline because it's in some cases cliche, but a disciplined mindset with a very honest outlook. And in some cases, it's like an increased sense of ownership from marketing leaders. Marketing leaders get bombarded with messaging and emails and whatnot from everyone around the organization, from sales, from C-level. Everyone's got an opinion on what it is the marketing should be doing. But we're the folks in the seat with the data of what's working, and we can see into the sales engine, and we can see where the leads are coming from. We need to devise our strong opinions of these are the leverage points. These are the places that we need to focus. These are the pillars that we're focused on, and hold strong to that and make it known that this isn't necessarily going to be a tough year, but it needs to be a rigid year. We need to really make strong and disciplined decisions. There's not really much time or budget for meandering and aimless activity. Yes, testing is still important, but it's testing within the confines of what you think is going to move those leverage points that you've identified. It's not testing for the sake of new thing is available, so we should try it.
Yep, I would agree. And I would add that, I posted this on LinkedIn, the other day. You kind of have to go back to first principles, right? It's not enough to kind of rely on like, we have this process and we followed it, so we're going to continue to follow it. Really pays to take a step back from all the things that you're doing, generating leads, whether it's marketing qualified, sales qualified leads, and just genuinely ask the question of like, is our marketing making people want our stuff? And then are those people going and buying our stuff, right? You could have the best looking funnel in the world on paper, and all the numbers could theoretically make sense, but if it's not ultimately turning into revenue and pipeline, which is the ultimate goal, then you have to step back and fundamentally ask yourself, like, is this doing what we want it to do? And kind of problem solve from there. And if you're able to step back and take that perspective, step back from the noise of marketing and step back from the, all the data that flows around that can get you lost in the weeds, you can really start to think and understand, like, what can I do that can really, move our marketing programs towards where they need to be in terms of the revenue outcomes we want to achieve. So yeah, Josh, 100% discipline. And I think that, thinking from a first principles perspective is going to go a long way for us. Last question for you, Josh, and then we'll open it up to some Q&A. So we like to end these calls with some action steps. Like, what are some actionable things we as marketers can do right now, jumping off of this call, to get 2023 started off on the right foot?
Yeah, there's a lot you could do. What we are going to do, and what I've done in previous years that's had a tremendous benefit, is first 30 days of the year, or 30 days starting now, whatever you want to do, you're going to talk to two different cohorts of your customers or clients. It's going to be ones who just came in the door less than a month or 45 days ago. They're brand new, so their buying process and how they found you is still very fresh. And then the other is the total opposite of that. It's people who have been with you forever. They've used your product or service for years. They're your advocates already. They've already given you testimonials. And you're going to talk to them individually with some really specific focuses on each cohort. The people who just came in the door, you're going to ask them everything that you possibly can about how they found you, why they picked you. Find the patterns, find the repeat comments from 10 to 15 different prospects or new clients that you can find. And then for those who have been around, it's really one question, like, why are you still here? What's the biggest thing that we do for you, or that our product provides for you, that has kept you here? Is it price? Is it customer service? Is it value? Is it frequency of product updates? What are the things? And those are going to be two really important sets of information, because with them, you can take how people found you. They heard you on podcast, their friend told them, maybe it was Google search for a change or whatever it is. And you can build out the call it the average life cycle of a prospect and how they went from unaware to aware to purchased. And then you're going to take all the things that your long-term customers have told you they love about you, and you're going to make sure that messaging exists along that entire process from how your prospects told you they just came in the door. What you'll inevitably find is that you do a really, really good job of giving away all those wonderful goodies and bits of messaging all the way when they're ready to buy. And you maybe not so much of a good at a job here somewhere in the beginning, but you can really start to plug and play what your existing customers are literally telling you they value into places where potential customers are looking to find out if you're the right fit for them. And that falls into all your advertising, all your email, all your organic blog posts. It can give you a lot of sense of what kind of content should I put out there that brings the people who have been with me and us and our company for a long time. And all your tactical and pillar and initiatives, can support that, but that'll be some of the best first party data that you can get to inform the messaging that you put out to get what you already love that you've gotten.
Yep. You guys heard here first. Lean into your customers, learn why they chose you, why they love you, and what could make your product better, right? Get all that kind of feedback to improve not only your messaging and your marketing, but also, how you're serving your existing customers, right? And in doing so, marketing can really become a lever that serves the whole business function, right? I was having a conversation with some CMOs a few weeks back, and they were frustrated that marketing has been relegated to the position in a lot of CXOs' eyes, a lot of executives' eyes, where it's just promotion, right? But if you think about marketing, it includes the 4 Ps, it includes pricing, it includes product, right? So, heading into 2023, by leaning into your customers, you can also start to, really have a bigger impact as a marketer across your organization as a whole, and really fulfill what it means to be a marketer and the amount of change you can influence on the organizations you serve. So Josh, thank you. This has been fantastic. For those of you who don't know Josh, I'll reiterate, he is a over a decade long in the trenches digital marketer. He's worked with hundreds of companies. He is both wide and deep in terms of his expertise. So without further ado, thank you guys so much for joining. Hope you guys got a lot of takeaways from the session. Josh, thank you. I know I certainly had some good frameworks heading into 2023 here, and we will see you guys on the next one in February.